Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, coast to coast. Thank you for spending some time with us on the program today. A War of Love, second edition, builds on the work of A War of Love, poems by William T. Elliott, a book of poems expressing the reflections on love and life of a Vietnam-era veteran after the Vietnam War. The poems are easy to read, fall into three categories: pretty poems, humorous poems, and spiritual poems. William Elliott was born in 1951 in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In 1966, he and his family moved to Hot Springs, South Dakota, graduated high school in 1969. After high school, he took 2 years of college at Northern State College. Then, in 1972, joined the Air Force, was primarily stationed at Aldous Air Force Base in Aldous, Oklahoma, and Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. Honorably discharged from the Air Force in 1975. He completed his B.S. degree in environmental science in 1977, later completed a master's in business administration from the University of South Dakota. Now became interested in poetry while experiencing health issues, found it to be therapeutic. After retirement, he took his poetry to the next level, recently taking 2 first place and 1 second place awards at the Veterans Creative Arts Festival in the Black Hills region. His insight of his surroundings, both humorous and inspiring. The author of War of Love, second edition, William Elliott, our guest on This Week in America. William, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
This book is so well done, and it's a follow-up. It's the second edition. Let's talk about the concept in the beginning. What led you to write your book, A War of Love?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. When I went under the knife 3 times at the hands of military surgeons in the service, and that kind of messed me up. So I started having panic attacks after the service, and I guess the poetry was a way to get out of those panic attacks, is what it was. So I started having panic quite a bit in 1982. And had to quit my job with the state health department in South Dakota in 1982. And so when I got back from the VA in Hot Springs, the Lord said to me, "Well, Bill, it's time for you to start writing poems." So I did the most alien thing I'd ever done in my life, which is to take a piece of paper and a pencil and write a poem. And the first poem I wrote was a beagle, which is the first poem in the book, by the way. And after that, I wrote a lot of poems in the next few months and in the next couple of years. And I compiled those poems into 2 booklets, which are the first 2 sections of the book. One was poems, and the other is The Pretty and the Rascals. And so that's kind of where I got started with the poems.
Yeah, once you got started, it was not looking back, was it? Does this come natural to you, being able to tap into your insights and emotions and share those?
Oh yeah, very much so. And I was able to write naturally when I started writing, and I wrote some poems that were a little darker, but I didn't collect any of those into my booklets. I just collected the best that would be useful to other people in the booklets. And those are the 2 booklets that I wrote, are the 2 first sections of the book. And so I would say that the poems come very naturally for me. I tried writing prose, but that didn't work so well, so I just stuck to poems.
Well, the book we're talking about is A War of Love, second edition by William Elliott, our guest on the program. His website is williamtelliott.com, and Elliott is E-L-L-I-O-T-T, williamtelliott.com. Book available at Amazon as well. And if you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly to get information on his book. How was this book compiled? In putting this book together, the way you've got it organized is really well done. How did you compile the poems and the format for your book, A War of Love?
Well, I Actually, I went back to school after my panic attacks and got an MBA at the University of South Dakota, and I got into teaching. So I didn't get into writing again until after I retired in 2008. But by 2014, I had started writing again, and I wrote in sections, and each section is a little booklet that I have compiled at a local publisher, and then I distribute those to family and friends, and then the sections were compiled later into the masterwork. So the first book that I came up with was in 2015. That was the first edition. That had 128 pages, and that's the War of Love poems by William T. Elliott. But then that that book is also a part of the second edition. The second edition, I kept on writing from 2015 on, and was able to get 6 more sections done, which were addendums which was an addendum that I put in with the first edition to create the second edition. My wife passed away in 2017, and so there's a special section in the book on her called Since Nancy, and so there's every one of these booklets is a part of the masterwork.
William T. Elliott, our guest on the program, A War of Love, second edition, the edition that we're talking about. Was there someone who influenced you and sort of led that path into writing? Any influences that were instrumental?
There was. I had my my high school English seminar teacher, Mrs. Petty. That was Old Lady Petty, we like to call her. She was the only lady I ever got a D from in high school. By the way, go figure. She was a big influence in my life, and I was able to read some of the great works under her tutelage. I read Great Expectations with Charles Dickens, Red Badge of Courage, and Huckleberry Finn. That was 3 that I remember. She liked poems that I didn't care for that much, such as Beowulf, but she was a big influence. And then I went to college 2 years before I went into the Air Force, and another instructor that influenced me quite a bit was Mrs. Zeman, who was my college English instructor for the first 2 years. And she ended up being a Vietnam protester and got thrown off of campus. That's neither here nor there. But she was a very good teacher. And I remember one of the books that she had us read that kind of led me into poetry was called Sound and Sense. And it was a very good book on poetry, and it gave me my first introduction to poetry. And by the way, Mrs. Zeman's favorite song was The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, which is a very poetic song.
It certainly is.
It is a beautiful song, and that was one of Mrs. Zeman's favorites. And so those were 2 big influences in my early writing career.
How about, I mentioned the time in the military, the service. How did that time impact your writing?
Well, I think I've been asked that question before. One thing that I wanted to do with my writing is the Vietnam War era was a very dark era, first of all, you know, and so I wanted to come up with something that was very positive, that didn't have any of the negative impacts of the Vietnam War associated with it, and so that was part of the reason why I went to poetry, is to come up with something positive instead of something negative. And nobody liked this during the war. Nobody did. And so I know when I got out of the service, even the VA, I got out because of the surgeries a little bit early. And even the VA, where I came back to work, because I had reemployment rights, they thought that I had taken a job from somebody who was up for full-time employment there, and they didn't want me working there. So I ended up, I remember I my family wasn't too happy with me when I quit the job at the VA, and so one day I walked out the front door of the house, of my family's house, and I hitchhiked from Hot Springs to Aberdeen, South Dakota, and enrolled in college there under the GI Bill, and so that was kind of where it all came from. Is that negativity? I wanted to do something positive instead of negative. And I remember I met my wife that same summer, and we were married 1 year later. So, but the negativity of the Vietnam era was what I wanted to get away from, and I wanted to say something positive, reach out to touch other people, and that's what I tried to do with the book.
The book is A War of Love, second edition, by William Elliott, our guest on the program. His website is williamtelliott.com, ELLIOTT.com. Link onto it by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can also find the book at Amazon as well. How about family impacting your writing? Did family have an impact, any influence on your writing?
Well, the family did, but not specifically the writing. Actually, I was touched by drugs and alcohol, not in my family. The alcohol, I was touched by alcohol in my family. My father was an alcoholic, but I was touched by that. And one of the poems that I write about, which is a story of my early life, is called A War of the Spirit, which is all about my fight against drug pushers in high school and alcoholism in my own family during my younger life. I actually had to physically fight drug pushers. The one fellow I handed in to the school administration for trying to sell LSD in the school library, and so that fellow was after me. His family were for years, and so that was something there. But my sister has actually done some religious writing. But she and I never communicated much on the writing end of it. So she's just given me her book and that type of thing. My father he was in North Africa during World War II and turned to drinking afterwards. But he was actually a fairly intelligent fellow as far as literature and things like that. So I guess you could say that my father was an influence from the point of view of being an intelligent fellow.
The time is going by way too quickly, and I would like for you to read a couple of poems before we run out of time. Would you do that for us, please?
Sure. I'll have to put my glasses on again here.
I understand that fully.
Okay, these are two poems. Both are veterans poems, and the one is called Peace, and that's about my efforts to forgive the North Vietnamese and the protesters after the fall of Saigon in the spring of '75, and the other is called The Fallen. And The Fallen is a tribute to my fallen comrades in arms that I wrote for Memorial Day in 2018. So I'll go ahead and read Peace first.
Okay.
And this is Peace. Long ago, I held a grudge from wars I'd fought that wouldn't budge. I lost the battle in the war from those I'd fought so long before, and hated them I could not win. It was for me a greatly sin. Through the years, I tried to win and held on to this greatly sinned, and held on to this grudge of hate for those that cared not for my fate. And then one day, while playing with a kitten that did like to play, I realized that the kitten small really had no grudge at all. And if I could be like my friend, I could then lose my greatly sin. And so I thought a little while, and then I hit upon a style of let it go and let it be. It was for me the land of free. Now I sit and laugh about the grudge I used to hold, and I'm even happier if the truth be told. So let it go and let it be. You'll thank me too, my friend. It is the end of war I fought. Thank God it was the end I sought.
I like that. Very well done.
And then the Fallen, which is the tribute to my fallen comrades in arms. The Fallen. Wounded warriors and the fallen are for you and me a thing of beauty as they fought to keep our land still free. Such a beauty we do honor on this Memorial Day, wishing their sweet families our heartfelt thanks we say. In many VAs, I have seen the wounded suffer much as doctors sought to heal their wounds with gentle, loving touch. But inside these men and women of iron and metal made, I see within a struggle still to make the battles fade. And if I could then wish a wish to give to them today, it would be that the battles hush and peace then find its way. Within their souls and in their minds, no more the battle here, instead to hear the children laugh, to bring the warrior cheer. So thank you, warrior, friend, salute, I do remember him well. It is for me you fought, some died in battlefields from hell, and I salute you.
Just two examples from the powerful book, A War of Love, second edition by William Elliott, our guest on the program. You deal with love as well. Talk about love and how that works into the poetry book.
Well, most of the book is really, it's all about love. There's not hardly a negative poem in the entire book. I think there's one poem where I was frustrated by some poets that snubbed me, but it's basically the entire book is a book of love. And I would like to say that our country really needs a lot more love, in this.
Yes, exactly.
Washington has gotten so far removed from that topic that it's just staggers the imagination just to think about it. And that's really the essence of the book is that's why it's called A War of Love. It's really not about war, it's about love. So
William T. Elliott, our guest on the program, his website is williamtelliott.com. That's ELLIOTT.com. What's so interesting with the book, and William was kind enough to send me a signed copy, and it's just you start reading and you really don't want to quit. There are so moving on so many different levels, and you really want to read one more before you go to bed for the night. Then you read two or three more before you get to that point. But the poems are easy to read. You do a very nice job of breaking those down. Sometimes we get lost in poetry and we really don't understand what it is the poet is trying to say. They're very easy to read. Talk about the challenge of doing that, to make these, what you're saying, the thoughts, the messages, relatable to people.
Well, I always try to talk from the heart, first of all, and I try to have a dialogue in the poem that's a common dialogue that's familiar to people. I do that, and you don't need a Ouija board and a compass to read these poems.
Exactly.
You really don't. And so that's what I try to do, is always have a common element to the poems that people can identify with, and I try never to get into so much symbolism that it's difficult to keep track of it. I know some poems are like that. They get into a huge amount of abstract symbolism, but I don't do that with my poems. I try to speak from the heart.
Well, we thank you for that, because we can read your poems, relate to them. They're very understandable. A couple minutes left in the program. Talk a little bit about the goals for the book and what you're working on now. Will we see another edition of War of Love?
You will see another edition. I'm right now, I've just finished doing another booklet called Charlie. It's all about a Vietnam kitty, not a Vietnam, a Hollywood kitty that my sister had last Halloween, and that's a booklet that I just come out with. I distributed that to family and friends, and I usually run about 6 sections before I try another edition. So that's kind of my goal right now. And another thing I've thought about is just compiling a work of humorous poems only, and putting those into a work. So that's those are a couple of my goals. So.
And you can follow William on his website, which is williamtelliott.com. And animals, nature, a big part of the poems that William has in his collections. The second edition we're talking about, A War of Love, it's available at William's website. It's available at Amazon. If you go to our website, you can link on to all of the information. William, a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you for sharing some of your poetry. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
It has been our pleasure. Our guest, William T. Elliott, author of A War of Love, second edition. Information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.